So Reform UK are still top of the polls. A new YouGov MRP poll, which shows projections for seats, says that if an election were held today, Reform would get the most seats, fall short of a majority. Other polls have put Reform on 34%, which is interesting because that's the percentage the Labour government got at the 2024 general election. So, Tom, the direction of travel is abundantly clear, even if Reform is still currently falling short of a majority.
No, absolutely. And I think it's been clear for some time now that provided things carry on the tram lines that have currently been set, Reform are odds on to at least be the largest party at the next election, which, because we've seen so many polls like this, we've seen them slowly creep up since the general election that was only last summer. We've become sort of used to this, but this is an incredible once-in-a-century event that we could be looking at here. Obviously, there's a lot that could change between now and the next election. There's a hell of a lot of time between now and then. There's also the extent to which things are so volatile at the moment that, you know, parties' fortunes can rise and fall very quickly. And there's obviously a lot that, as a party, they would have to do to properly kind of fortify themselves, allow them to properly campaign, to build a genuine organisation, so on and so forth. But, I mean, it's just absolutely incredible. I mean, not only are Reform chalking up these kind of historic gains, but you've got a Labour Party, a new government, which is breaking records for how unpopular it is. I mean, in that MRP poll, they would be reduced down to something like 170-something seats, which is less than half what they got at the last election. Yeah. I know we all knew that was a bit of a sandcastle majority because of how low the turnout was and because they managed to squeak it on a relatively low vote share. But everything is still to play for, you know, and I think that kind of complacency which set in after the last election, which is that things are going back to normal. Yeah. Adults in a room, pick your cliche. Stability, all of that. It was, you know, at the very least, it was just a kind of pause placed on the populist revolt that has been taking place for 9 years now, basically in this country since Brexit. So, yeah, plenty to watch. But it's we shouldn't, I guess, become numb to how significant these sorts of numbers are. Yeah, Ella.
Oh, well, it's kind of sweet that this polling has come out on the anniversary of Brexit, which was this week, a few days ago. Yeah. Because Reform was the Brexit party, but it also is the continuation of the Brexit spirit. In that, you know, obviously Nigel Farage was one of the key political figures throughout that Brexit moment, but more importantly, that the people who support Reform out in society, average voters, are people who have maintained that despite all the sort of poo-pooing from politicians about, oh, look at what it's done to the economy. Oh, look at, you know, it hasn't gone anywhere. Oh, you know, the continuous slandering of Brexit that has never stopped since the second after the result was announced. The anger about that and the desire to fulfill the promises of what Brexit could bring hasn't gone away. And, you know, you have to admit that over the last 9 years, I've certainly had moments of severe depression where I just think it's over and gone and wasted and spent, and you know it's never going to happen. But I think that Reform's success shows that there's lots of people who aren't so downhearted about it and do want something different. I mean, you know, Reform is a party that seems to do everything it can to thwart itself. You know, it's constantly having these sort of almost celebrity gossip pages style internal wars.
Sacked and rehired chairman within a weekend.
You know, and it's lots of it's high up people spend a lot of time sniping at each other on Twitter. It's, you know, a lot of its policies are, I think, sort of semi-ill thought out. But it kind of doesn't matter because it will matter come a next election. But the thing that really matters to people is that, one, it's not Labour, and two, that it's more substantial than not just being Labour or the Conservatives, that is actually arguing, is able to, particularly its MPs in the House of Commons, are able to bring up issues that matter to people, so whether that's immigration or the rest of it. And, you know, will in a few years' time when the election comes around, they be as the prospects be as strong? I mean, if you look at what the Labour Party is getting up to at the moment, yes, and we might not even have to wait till the next election, because the way in which, in particular, Keir Starmer now news out that he's going to backtrack on these welfare reforms, it's not just the sort of disarray and chaos, it's the fact that it's clear that Labour has no clue what it stands for. No clue. No sort of, even within itself, no conversations amongst themselves about what they stand for. Reform knows what it stands for. And I think that's its main strength.
Yeah, and Tom, I did want to move on to talk about that, about Labour in particular. I mean, we've had 120 MPs at least threatening to block the government's welfare reforms. You know, there's been these sort of peace talks in Downing Street today. I mean, that is an extraordinary loss. You know, we can talk about the welfare issue later, but what an extraordinary loss of authority for Keir Starmer, who was elected with, you know, as he would see it, this huge mandate with hundreds of seats. I mean, how can you lose a majority like that? Is insane.
No, absolutely. I think parliamentary parties, they can smell it as much as the country can. As far as they know that he's weak, they know that he has U-turned on so many policies so far. There's also, as you say, we could get into the ins and outs of these welfare reforms and the very kind of crude way in which they've tried to do this. Obviously, the welfare system is insane in all kinds of ways and needs to be addressed. You can't have a situation where you've got vast swathes of towns and cities across the country on disability benefits, which has ballooned over the course of just a couple of years. You know,
and there's no relationship to people's ill health.
You know, that is obviously something that can't be allowed to happen if you want people to live fulfilling lives with employment and meaning and so on. But at the same time, I think it's interesting that this has become the flashpoint issue, because there's often a lot of conversation about what does the Labour Party stand for under Keir Starmer or not under Keir Starmer. There's all kinds of things that this government has done to try and curry favour with the electorate, which has annoyed a lot of people. The fact that this one has really kicked off, and the way in which you see Labour MPs talking about how this is not what I got into Labour to do, I think has been interesting insofar as, even aside from the specific reforms themselves, sort of welfarism is like the ideology of the Labour Party. Like, they do kind of think of their organisation not as the political wing of organised Labour, but basically as a kind of giant NGO, quango. It's kind of a paternalistic, you know, sort of well-to-do ladies going into the Victorian East End to, you know, hand out food parcels and tell people how to wash themselves. It's that kind of thing which really animates them. So I think it's, and almost the whole point of politics is to make sure that people at the bottom have a few more crumbs from the table. That, I think, is the fact that it's blown up over this rather than foreign aid or anything else, I think is telling. But it is just a sign that party discipline is going to break down the situation where your leader is weak. And even with the majority that he's got, he is incredibly weak. And I don't know what you two think about this, but I've been really struck by how much people in the public really hate Keir Starmer. Like, it'd be one thing if they were indifferent to him, like they thought he was an empty suit, which he is in so many respects, but the animosity towards him, I'm not saying it hasn't been earned because he's terrible, but I struggle to put my finger on why that is. You know, I know why I hate him intensely.
There's some anti-Keir Starmer graffiti outside my house that's just appeared, so I mean, I'm not really in favour of graffiti, but I endorse that message.
There's this, there was that video that he did with this woman in her kitchen, about, go to talk to a woman in her kitchen, and she was a single mum, I think, and that kind of thing. And there was this, I don't know what the truth of it was, but there was this big conspiracy online that it was fake, that this particular kitchen had been seen various times.
It's conspiracy about everything these days.
To different people. Whatever, but the point was, it was such a drippingly dishonest video. I mean, even, it's so outdated, this whole kind of like going and pressing flesh with the common people thing. It's just like weird that they even do it anymore. And he's so dishonest. I mean, the thing about these welfare reforms is, the whole discussion is dishonest, because the Labour Party and anyone with any sense knows that there are lots of people who are on disability benefit who don't need to be.
Yeah.
And you can make that sound harsh by doing what Labour's done, which is just cut, and, no conversation as to why, and then you look cruel. Or you can explain it and say, huge numbers of young people claiming mental health issues is not a good thing. We should change that. That's not, these numbers don't reflect granny with one leg. They reflect a deep social problem which needs to be addressed. And you have to have some guts to make that argument. No Labour Party MP, whether it's the ones who are for the cuts, ones against the cuts, wants to have that discussion about why it is that, in particular, so many working class people find themselves on these various benefits, living, by the way, crap lives, not living the life of Riley, living really quite miserable existences. And, the flip side of it is that if you are one of those people who's faced with a rubbish job that has no prospect and will make your life miserable, or sitting at home on, a bit of pittance of disability benefit, I also don't blame them for picking the latter, because again, it's a kind of, the Labour Party seems to think it can just cut benefits and people will leap at the opportunity to go on whatever sort of rubbish job they're advertising at the job centre. That's not the case. You have to make some kind of effort to make work attractive to people, but also make the case that being unemployed is not an attractive prospect for your life. And that's not sort of to glorify work and careers, by the way. In my mind, you work to earn money to live your life, whether that's family or friends or fun or whatever it is. But, even making that argument now is like you're evil. So we have to get a little bit more honest about what is it that's actually happening here. It is not the case that we've got some kind of huge sickness epidemic in society.
Yeah, I think, what is it, nearly 40% increase in claimants since COVID. 1 in 4 related to mental health. That's not that's not sustainable. It's not a good thing. It is bad for the recipient of that, not just for the public purse or whatever, which is that's obviously why the cut is being made, because they're panicking about Rachel Reeves's black hole, but it's not good for the people on the receiving end of it. And so I guess it's quite sick making when these Labour MPs, okay, they're right to oppose these particular reforms, but I think they would oppose any reform. I think they would just be in favour of welfarism as
I forgot that, Tom, the point that Tom makes is so crucial about the Labour Party being like these benefactors, because they, you've got Rachel Reeves, who is desperate to make some money somewhere, but also they want to maintain this gloss of being really lovely and caring. So in the childcare sector, for example, Hackney Council, Labour-run council forever, has just upped nursery fees by like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pounds. It's unbelievable. And the Labour Party's main policy around children is to get people, nursery and primary school staff, to brush kids' teeth because parents can't. Yeah. And so there's this complete disconnect between what people actually want and what the Labour Party thinks people need. And it's just enraging.